In the previous lectures, we examined how energy enters marine ecosystems through primary production and how plankton populations fluctuate through time in response to environmental conditions, grazing, and climate variability. We saw that microscopic phytoplankton convert sunlight and nutrients into organic matter and that plankton populations can change rapidly through interactions with zooplankton and physical ocean processes. Today, we expand our perspective from plankton communities to the broader structure of marine food webs. Food webs describe how energy moves from primary producers through multiple levels of consumers within an ecosystem. By examining these energy pathways, we can understand how different organisms are connected and how changes at one level of the ecosystem can influence many others. Understanding food webs is essential because they determine how efficiently energy captured by phytoplankton ultimately supports larger organisms such as fish, seabirds, and marine mammals. Marine ecosystems are organized into a series of trophic levels, which represent the positions organisms occupy within a food web based on how they obtain energy. Each trophic level depends on the one below it for energy. At the base of the marine food web are primary producers, the organisms responsible for converting inorganic carbon into organic matter through primary production. As we discussed previously, phytoplankton dominate this role across the ocean, while macroalgae and seagrasses contribute significantly in shallow coastal environments. The next trophic level consists of primary consumers, organisms that feed directly on primary producers. In marine ecosystems, these primary consumers are often zooplankton that graze on the phytoplankton. Small herbivorous fish may also occupy this level in some ecosystems. Above these organisms are secondary consumers, which feed on primary consumers. These might include larger zooplankton, small fish, or other predators that consume herbivorous organisms. At even higher trophic levels, we find tertiary consumers and top predators, such as large fish, sharks, seabirds, and marine mammals. These organisms often occupy the highest levels of the food web and rely on energy that has passed through multiple previous trophic levels. The structure of these trophic levels determines how energy moves through the ecosystem and how efficiently it supports higher levels of marine life. When scientists first began studying ecosystems, they often described energy flow using food chains. A food chain is a simple linear representation of who eats whom in an ecosystem. For example, a basic food chain might show phytoplankton being eaten by zooplankton, which are then consumed by fish, which are in turn eaten by larger predators, such as a shark. While food chains are useful for illustrating basic energy transfer, they greatly oversimplify the complexity of real ecosystems. In reality, most organisms consume a variety of prey and may themselves be eaten by multiple predators. As a result, energy does not move through ecosystems along a single pathway. To better represent these interactions, scientists use the concept of food webs. A food web is a network of interconnected feeding relationships that illustrate the many ways energy can move through an ecosystem. In marine ecosystems, Food webs can be particularly complex because of the enormous diversity of organisms involved. Just look at the so-called simplified food web for the Northwest Atlantic on the right side of the slide. Many species occupy multiple trophic levels or change their diet as they grow. For example, a fish species may consume zooplankton during its early life stages, but later feed on other fish as it grows larger. A sea turtle may feed on crabs as a juvenile, but only feed on seagrasses as an adult. As you can see, food webs can get very complicated very quickly in the oceans. Understanding food webs helps us appreciate the interconnected nature of marine ecosystems and how changes affecting one species may influence many others. One of the most important principles governing food webs is that energy transfer between trophic levels is inefficient. When organisms consume food, only a small portion of the energy contained in that food becomes incorporated into their own biomass. A commonly used approximation in ecology is the 10% rule, which suggests that roughly 10% of the energy contained in one trophic level is transferred to the next level above it. The remaining energy is lost through various biological processes. One major source of energy loss occurs through metabolism. Organisms use energy to maintain bodily functions such as movement, respiration, digestion, and maintaining cellular processes. Much of this energy is released as heat and cannot be passed to the next trophic level. Another source of energy loss occurs because not all consumed material is assimilated. Some material passes through the digestive system without being absorbed, while other portions may be excreted as waste. Because energy decreases with each trophic transfer, marine ecosystems typically contain fewer organisms at higher trophic levels. This pattern explains why large predators are much less abundant than organisms at lower levels of the food web. One of the most familiar pathways of energy transfer in marine ecosystems is known as the classical grazing food chain. In this pathway, energy captured by phytoplankton through photosynthesis is transferred directly to zooplankton that graze on them. Zooplankton consume phytoplankton cells and convert that energy into their own biomass. These zooplankton are then eaten by small fish or other predators, which in turn may be consumed by larger predators such as larger fish, seabirds, or marine mammals. This grazing pathway represents an efficient route for transferring energy through the food web because relatively few steps separate primary producers from higher level consumers. In productive marine regions, large populations of phytoplankton can support abundant zooplankton and fish populations. The grazing food chain is particularly important in regions with strong nutrient input, such as upwelling systems or temperate coastal waters. In these environments, high phytoplankton productivity supports large zooplankton populations and productive fisheries. However, not all primary production follows this pathway. In many ocean regions, energy moves through additional microbial pathways before reaching larger organisms. In addition to the classical grazing pathway, marine ecosystems also contain an important pathway known as the microbial loop. This pathway involves microorganisms that recycle organic matter, within the plankton community and plays a critical role in retaining energy and nutrients in the surface ocean. To understand this process, we need to begin with the idea that not all organic material produced by phytoplankton is immediately consumed by larger organisms like zooplankton. A significant portion of that production is released into the surrounding water as dissolved organic matter, often abbreviated as DOM. This can occur through several mechanisms, including leakage from phytoplankton cells, excretion during metabolism, sloppy feeding by zooplankton, and simply the breakdown of dead organisms. This dissolved organic matter does not simply disappear. Instead, it becomes a major resource for heterotrophic bacteria, which are abundant throughout the ocean. These bacteria take up dissolved organic compounds and use them as a source of carbon and energy, converting DOM into bacterial biomass. In doing so, they effectively transform material that would otherwise be unavailable to most organisms into a form that can re-enter the food web. These bacteria are then consumed by microzooplankton, such as small flagellates and ciliates. These microbial predators feed on bacteria and incorporate that energy into their own biomass. From there, energy can be transferred to larger zooplankton and eventually to higher trophic levels, reconnecting this recycled pathway to the broader marine food web. What is important here is that the microbial loop represents a recycling pathway that retains both energy and nutrients within the surface ocean. Instead of organic matter being lost rapidly to deeper waters through sinking, the microbial loop allows that material to be reused multiple times. This process is especially important in oligotrophic, nutrient-poor regions, where external nutrient supply is limited and ecosystems rely heavily on internal recycling to sustain productivity. The concept should connect directly back to what we discussed in Unit 2 regarding nutrient cycling and decomposition. The microbial loop is essentially the biological mechanism that keeps nutrients moving within the system, ensuring that even in nutrient-poor environments, primary production can continue through regenerated nutrients. At the same time, it is important to recognize that while the microbial loop is efficient at recycling energy, it can also reduce the efficiency of energy transfer to higher trophic levels. Because energy passes through multiple microbial steps before reaching larger organisms, more energy is lost through respiration at each step. As a result, ecosystems dominated by the microbial loop often support less biomass at higher trophic levels compared to systems dominated by direct grazing pathways. An important characteristic of marine food webs is the relationship between the size of organisms and their position within the food web. In many marine ecosystems, predators tend to be larger than the organisms they consume. As a result, energy often moves through the ecosystem along a gradient of increasing body size. In the plankton community, extremely small phytoplankton may be consumed by slightly larger zooplankton, which are then consumed by larger predators such as fish larvae. As energy moves upward through trophic levels, the organisms involved generally increase in size. The size structure of plankton communities can strongly influence the efficiency of energy transfer through the food web. When primary production is dominated by larger phytoplankton cells, such as diatoms, zooplankton can often consume them directly, allowing energy to move quickly to higher trophic levels. In contrast, when primary production is dominated by extremely small phytoplankton cells, energy may first pass through multiple microbial steps before reaching larger organisms. This additional complexity can reduce the efficiency with which energy moves toward higher trophic levels. As a result, the size structure of plankton communities plays an important role in determining the productivity of marine ecosystems. Marine food webs are not static structures. Instead, they respond continuously to changes in environmental conditions. Because primary production forms the base of marine food webs, any factor that influences phytoplankton production can affect organisms throughout the entire ecosystem. For example, changes in nutrient availability may alter the abundance of phytoplankton species. If phytoplankton populations increase, zooplankton populations may also increase because food becomes more abundant. In turn, fish and other predators that depend on zooplankton may experience population increases. Conversely, if population productivity declines, these changes can cascade upward through the food web. Reduced phytoplankton growth may lead to declines in zooplankton populations, which then affect fish and other predators. Climate variability, such as El Niño events, provide a clear example of how physical changes in the ocean can influence food webs. As we saw in the previous lecture, ENSO events can alter nutrient supply and reduce phytoplankton productivity in certain regions, ultimately affecting the entire marine ecosystem. These cascading effects illustrate how tightly connected marine food webs are and why understanding energy flow is essential for interpreting ecosystem dynamics. Food webs are influenced not only by changes at the base of the ecosystem, but also by changes at higher trophic levels. When predators influence the abundance of organisms at lower trophic levels, the resulting chain of effects is known as a trophic cascade. In a trophic cascade, changes in predator populations can ripple downward through the food web. For example, if a top predator declines, the population of its prey may increase. If those prey organisms consume herbivores, herbivore populations may then decline, which can ultimately influence the abundance of primary producers. These cascading interactions demonstrate how strongly interconnected marine ecosystems are. Changes affecting one species can influence multiple trophic levels, sometimes producing unexpected ecological consequences. Human activities such as overfishing can also trigger trophic cascades by removing top predators from marine ecosystems. When these predators are removed, the balance of predator-prey interactions may shift, leading to changes in the structure of the ecosystem. Understanding trophic cascades helps scientists interpret how ecosystems respond to environmental change and human impacts. Can you think of a specific marine-based trophic cascade caused by humans? If you send me an email giving me a 2 to 3 sentence description of a human-caused trophic cascade in a marine ecosystem, and do this before the day we discuss this lecture, then I will give you 2 additional points on your previous exam. The movement of energy through marine food webs does not occur in isolation within a single ecosystem. Instead, energy often moves between different parts of the ocean, linking surface waters, coastal regions, and the deep sea into a connected system. This broader perspective is important because it shows that marine ecosystems are not independent units, but components of a larger integrated ocean system. Most of the energy that supports marine life originates in the sunlit surface ocean, where primary production occurs. Phytoplankton converts sunlight into organic matter, which then moves through food webs as organisms consume one another. While some of this energy remains in surface ecosystems, a portion is transported to other environments through biological and physical processes. One of the clearest examples of this cross-ecosystem energy transfer is a whale fall. When a large whale dies, its body sinks from the surface ocean to the sea floor, carrying with it a large amount of organic carbon that originated from surface food webs. Once on the seafloor, this material becomes an energy source for deep sea organisms. Scavengers such as sharks and hagfish may consume the soft tissues, followed by smaller organisms that feed on remaining material. Over time, even the bones support microbial communities that break down complex compounds and release nutrients, sustaining additional organisms. In this way, a single whale fall can support a localized deep sea community for years. This example highlights a key concept. Energy captured at the ocean's surface can be transported to and support life in completely different environments, including regions that lack sunlight and cannot support photosynthesis. Even though energy transfer between trophic levels is inefficient, the small fraction that reaches the deep ocean can be ecologically significant in energy-limited environments. Understanding these conditions and these connections help us see the ocean not as separate ecosystems, but as a linked system in which energy flows across boundaries, connecting surface productivity to life throughout the entire ocean. Before finishing today's lecture, I wanted to share one of my favorite diagrams. This illustration is the best one I have seen to demonstrate carbon and energy flow throughout an ocean basin. It even includes outside influencers such as pollution and nutrient runoff from land, and even predation by birds. You will see deep water formation and upwelling on the right side of the illustration, and of course, plenty of marine snow right there in the middle. Please take a moment to pause the video and take a careful look at everything that is happening here. At this point in the semester, we have covered everything that is included in this diagram. Can you make sense of it? If you can explain this illustration to someone with detail and accuracy, then you truly have a strong grasp on biological oceanography. Today, we examined how energy moves through marine ecosystems by exploring the structure of marine food webs. We saw that energy captured through primary production moves through multiple trophic levels, linking organisms through complex feeding relationships. We also explored how processes such as grazing, microbial recycling, and trophic cascades influence the structure and stability of these food webs. These energy pathways help explain how marine ecosystems function and why productivity at the base of the food web plays such an important role in supporting higher trophic levels. In the next lecture, We will dive into the coral reef ecosystems, one of the most diverse and productive marine habitats on Earth. Coral reefs provide an excellent opportunity to see how food webs, primary production, and symbiotic relationships combine to support complex marine communities.